This week on Dig Me Out.
Red Dragon tattoo is just about on me. I got it for you. So now do you want me with nothing to prove? Will you be my honey? Oh yeah. In you I can
With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay, speaking of the union, I forgot, we've been off a little bit, not off, but, Christmas break. We don't do
off. We don't take a break. What are you talking
like 3
about?
extra days.
True.
But someone who joined us in December that we need to say hello to is James Dunseth. Hello, James. Welcome. Oh, also Cabbage joined us. I forgot. I get confused when we do that, when we have those trial ones, because I'm not sure who actually joins or not, but Cabbage has been active on the message board. So hi, Cabbage and James. Welcome to you both. Speaking of union members, we have a union member with us. He's back for his second pick. He was here last year for the album Your Body Above Me by Black Lab, and he's back again from Dayton, Ohio, Mr. Mike Bankhead. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm okay, Tim and Jay.
Excellent. So you're back. We actually got you scheduled with the event of your anniversary, as opposed to many months late, because as I was showing Jay when I put together our list of patrons, we have like January, February. We have about 3 weeks each to do patron reviews, and we have like 12 people who all joined in those months. So it gets a little crowded when the anniversaries come up. So sometimes people get pushed back. This year I rotated that. I moved the back of the line to the front of the line. So it's gonna cause some upheaval.
I apologize for being annoying on the Discord and being like, "Hey, it's been like 7 months since my anniversary date. I'm never gonna get to pick a record." So yeah.
Sorry. No, just you. You are not getting it. No, yes, you are. And here you're back. Second pick. Let the audience know what album we'll be talking about on this episode.
Utopia Parkway, which is an actual street.
Yes, it is. And it's by the band
Fountains of Wayne. This is their sophomore record, and you guys covered their debut record many years ago, but I did go back and listen to that one before I joined the union. That was one of the early listens I gave you guys.
Yes, episode 299 back in 2016. It was fall of 2016, October of 2016. We talked about the debut album, the self-titled debut album by Fountains of Wayne. At that point in the history of the band, they were essentially a duo. They Adam Schlesinger and Chris Collingwood essentially wrote that whole album together.
Yep.
And so, but for this record, and I'm not going to do a complete history of the band since we probably did it in that episode, they added 2 members that would be with the band going forward. And that was drummer Brian Young and guitarist Joey Porter, who we interviewed. Back, when was it? That was episode 334 in June of 2017.
I listened to that one too.
We talked to him. We learned about his band, the Belltower, that he was in prior to Fountains of Wayne. And actually, Adam Schlesinger was in the Belltower briefly, and then wasn't. And then whatever happened, and they ended up bringing him in for Fountains of Wayne. So you mentioned this is a sophomore album.
Yeah,
from the band.
Adam and Chris wrote all these songs, but you can really hear the dimension that Jody brought in. Right? There's more guitar-y kind of stuff going on than songwritery stuff when you compare it to the first record.
Yep, we'll get into that shortly. Just some info on this record. It was released April 6th, 1999. It was produced by Adam and Chris, released on Atlantic Records, and they were then dropped after this record.
Oh,
which is
man.
ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it didn't sell the way that the label wanted to, of course, was the answer. And they actually, I believe that they asked to be dropped because they weren't getting any support by the label. And then they ended up signing to S Curve Records, which was founded by former Mercury Records executive Steve Greenberg, and had a licensing agreement with EMI. So he was a guy who was already in the business, and Mercury Records was a name. And then I think it also got released by Virgin, maybe in the UK. But let's go back to this record we're talking about.
I'll bet Atlantic regretted that decision. Like
I'm guessing they did.
Yeah.
So a little bit of info. Utopia Parkway is a real place. It's in New York. The sign that's on the cover is at the corner of Utopia and Beechhurst in Queens. And Adam Schlesinger said the name is so evocative. It ties in all these different places and characters because there's such a sense of longing about it. So this is sort of a loose concept album. I say loose because, like, essentially they wanted to write songs that were all about their area that they were from, and were inspired by bands like the Kinks and some other artists that made albums about their, I guess, where they grew up. He mentioned that Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen was another one, where it's about a particular place. So that's a little bit about the record. Let's get into some of the comments from Patreon from our patrons. Specifically, I want to mention one. I want to bring this up for, it's not in order, but I want to mention this. Vadim Taver said, if not mistaken, I think this is the first album Adam contributed songs. That's actually not right. It's the first album with Joey Porter. Anyway, while I still prefer the self-titled album, this is a worthy album and a solid sophomore effort from the band. A Fine Day for a Parade really showcases how they could write beautiful ballads just as well as power pop masterpieces. Also, Pitchfork gave this a 5.1, which instantly means this album rules and they can go fuck themselves. I pulled up the Fountains of Wayne review. We will get to it at the latter half of the show.
Okay.
But
Good.
let me say, it is about as pitchforky a review as Pitchfork can do in terms of talking around the album and assuming its creation instead of actually talking about, the music. Some of the other comments we received.
The actual information on the disc.
Yes. Whitney Bueller said it's a worthy record. Nate Smith, for sure, worthy album. Frank Garcia Hell, absolutely worthy album. I love that first album, but this showed off their unmatched polished pop rock chops, like a more accessible, radio-friendly Jellyfish. But like Jellyfish, it was the right band at the wrong time. I always thought of Fountains of Wayne as my generation's big star. The loss of Adam Schlesinger was devastating. This album only gets better with age. Of course, Adam passed away at the beginning of COVID in 2020. In case you don't remember. Justin Moore, worthy album for sure. Pure power pop bliss. Joe Royland, worthy. When the band's debut came out in 96, it hit with me right off the bat. This one, though, didn't connect with me right away. Kind of got lost in the shuffle of other stuff I was listening to at the time. It was only years later when I went back and reinvestigated it that I realized what a great album it truly was. Jim Cope, Ian McIver said, I'm only familiar with the band because of their early 2000 song. Guess which one? Bonus guess for my opinion on that song. I tried giving this a chance unsuccessfully. I have no idea what song people would download on Napster a couple months later to stick into their record labels, to stick to the record labels for that one radio hit song. It all sounds like filler to me and not worthy of hard drive space in 99. Worthy single. Gincopany. I don't think Fountains of Wayne were even capable of writing album filler material, and this one is solid start to finish. So some disagreement there. You said, I'm curious about this, despite Chris Collingwood's mild regret of the bridge he wrote on Red Dragon Tattoo, this is a worthy album. Though I foresee someone will complain about how many songs are on it. I don't know who that is. I've never met that person. What do you mean by the mild regret about the bridge?
On his social media, which is under his new band name, Look Park, Chris Collinsworth made a remark once, kind of self-denigrating about the bridge on Red Dragon Tattoo, and that is probably 100% due to the lyric about corn. I'm gonna guess a little cheesy.
Which came up in the Pitchfork review, but I think it's wrong. Not that I don't disagree that like putting a cultural reference can, age a song. But we'll get to that.
I think it's hilarious. But I didn't write it. I can understand that somebody who wrote that might look back and go, why did I write that?
Sure. I mean, you're writing a very pop song. You put a little something in there so that, it's like the New Radicals throwing in Beck and Hansen and that kind of stuff. Like, yes, exactly. That's aged, but it's still funny.
Yeah, I think it's great.
So we'll get to the poll results of where the album Better EP Decent Single at the end of the show, but now we're going to talk about the record. Jay, tell me one thing you liked about Utopia Parkway by Fountains of Wayne.
I found myself really paying attention to the vocal melodies on this record, maybe more so than the previous one we reviewed, and really appreciated like just how much movement there is, and they develop, they go somewhere. I think this is a genre, as you're being sort of more trying to be more accessible, trying to be obviously more of a pop band, there's probably a tendency for a lot of acts, especially in modern times, to simplify things down, and there's a balance there where you want to do that, but also keep it interesting and most importantly, unpredictable in some ways. So you don't always know where the melody is going to go and you're surprised when it gets there. So I think they do a great job of that. Just really focused in on, Amity Gardens is one good example of that. Utopia Parkway is another good one, obviously.
Waiting for my time to come. I'm gonna get a little shopping done. I'll get some paper and a staple gun and put my name in front of everyone. I got it made, I got it down. I am the king of this goddamn town. I'm on my own, I'm on my way. Down Utopia, Utopia Parkway.
They also use harmony then to either reinforce that. So there's a pattern here of, verses where, they'll sing this vocal line that's, really solid in terms of a melody, and then they'll just repeat it with the harmony sort of in the space. So there's like this ping pong effect going on with the lead and then the harmony vocal, which I think works really well. And then they bring the harmony in for a pre-chorus or a chorus to really either counter it or add a secondary part that really elevates it. So just the combination of the lead and the harmony to me is the core of what makes all these songs work. That even extends to like a lot of the guitar work is very grounded in what the melody is, the vocal melody. So there's some very tasty guitar solos and leads. When you break them down, usually they're staying within those leads are staying within the realm of something you've heard the vocal do, or they're just so strong on themselves. And sometimes on some of the songs, like the vocal almost takes a second, like a backseat a bit to the guitar lead, because it's delivering the hook. So just that really well crafted, strong understanding of like how to deliver melodies that are both simple and accessible, but also interesting enough that they're not predictable. I think that's probably the biggest, to me, the biggest flaw I usually find in music that's either power pop or pop, is when I can start to predict where it's going and guess what the next line's going to be. I'm getting bored. Even if I'm just trying to have fun with it, it's still like not engaging me. And they just do a great job of like varying that up and making sure that it's tasty and easy to understand, but not boring. So to me, that's what this whole record is about. It's about those melodies put in a song, to deliver them, and then putting a band around that is really just in service of making sure that comes through. So that's what worked for me. What worked for you, Tim?
Well, in comparison to the first record, which, if I'm remembering correctly, we liked but didn't love. I think that's the probably the takeaway from that record. I feel like the addition of Joey Porter is the thing that elevates this to being a fully realized idea, in terms of, yes, that these guys are capable of writing hooks and harmonies and coming up with really catchy parts. But the fact that you can add in a really, really talented guitarist who can give you, the sort of shredding, I don't know how I describe it, like 70s influenced wah solo of Go Hippie, and then also come up with is it Valley of Malls that has the back and forth between the two stereo of the guitar. I'm guessing that's Joey Porter, and that he just plays all those parts live, because there's just so much diversity in his guitar playing. Probably, because he had been over in the UK in the 90s, and there's stuff that reminds me of like British 90s stuff.
Yeah.
Lost in Space has that feel, and it's like a fuzzier, edgier song.
And she walks the earth, but she's not from the human race. She's a pretty little thing, but she's lost. Yeah, she's lost in space. Yeah, she's lost in space.
There's a lot of classic sounding power pop, like Laser Show sounds like it could be, a classic 70s power pop song. But when he's able to rock out a little bit, it just brings us a little extra that I think the first record was missing. They're competent guitar players, but not in the way that Joey is. Now the songs, I feel like, are much more memorable. There was a couple on the first record. Radiation Vibe is the one that always sticks out to me. There was a few others, but here, like, every song has a personality. And you can kind of draw back to different bands or different power pop influences. I know Big Star was mentioned in the comments. Something like Denise has a bit more of an edge to it than maybe Big Star would. It's a little punkier, I would say.
Yep.
Compare that to Prom Theme, which is I don't want to say Queen-esque, but it has this
Yeah.
very heavy emotional vibe. That's
Kind
stuff
of,
that they didn't tackle before.
it's a big dramatic production too. That's fun.
Yes. So I think the thing that works best for me is just the diversity from song to song, combined with Joey Porter able to inject a lot of different guitar sounds. I reread the entry for him, and I was reading his Wikipedia, and he apparently has a giant collection of guitars, and it sounds like he has a giant collection of guitars because he's able to find the exact right sound for all of these. He's definitely not playing the same guitar on every song. And he's definitely, I mean, I know he uses Vox amps pretty much exclusively, but he's got a lot of tricks in his toolbox, whether it's, the big fuzzed out sound or a very tight, compressed guitar sound like on Denise. And he's able to do a lot of stuff. He can cover the typical guitar solo where you repeat the melody. He can do that, but then he can also go off and do an insane solo. So those are the two things that really drive the record for me. Mike, you picked this record. What is it that works best for you on this album?
The songwriting, it's impeccable. And when this record came out, I was just starting to write songs, and I never thought they were good enough to show anyone. So it was way after this before I got around to actually deciding to record my own music. But this is kind of like if you want to know how to write a good rock song, this album's a really good 101 on that. I think for all of these songs, obviously the production is great and the performances are great, but you could strip all of these down to an acoustic guitar or a piano, and these songs will still be good. The bridges on this record, and I don't do it in every song, but when there's a bridge, it does exactly what a bridge is supposed to do. If I was going to send someone who didn't know how to write a bridge and show them what they're supposed to do, other than maybe the one and Say It Ain't So, because that's probably my favorite rock bridge, I would say just listen to the bridges on Utopia Parkway, because this is exactly, they serve the exact purpose that bridges are meant to serve. There's a couple of songs here that follow the AABA structure, like there's no chorus per se, which is a very old song structure, but the songs are so good that when they use that structure, it doesn't come off as played out or old or trite. The lyrics are, for the most part, playful because it's kind of what they do, right? Sometimes there's a hint of melancholy. Even when they're being playful, there's a hint of melancholy. And on this album, there's a couple of songs that are just plain not happy at all. Like Troubled Times, Hat and Feet, right? There's a couple that, if you just listen to them, they're devastating. You all mentioned Prom Theme. The orchestral swell and the way they build that really, right, hammers the emotion home. But for me, there's a couple of chord choices they made in that song where they go to a minor that's not really in the key the song's in. And that is where I think the emotion, that's where I found the emotion in the song. And I liked it so much that I stole it. Because you can't copyright a chord idea, right? So I've actually taken ideas from some of their chord choices from what they do emotionally and used it in my own writing. I think it's just an exemplary. You can tell that they weren't goofing around as much as they were on their first record, right? The first record, they were in college together, they were having fun, and those songs are not quite as, I don't want to say they're not well crafted, because I think there's a lot of them that are really good. It just felt like they took more time crafting these than on the first record.
I think that shows in the diversity of the record. Like each of these songs feel like they said, let's give this one a personality, its own unique personality. So A Fine Day from a Parade to Denise, they don't even sound like they're on the same planet, but yet somehow in this record, because it's all like that, it kind of all makes sense. Speaking of Denise,
sorry, just real quick, I was going to say you can kind of see some of the beginnings of what would end up being the song that should not be named. So if you listen to like It Must Be Summer, Lost in Space, Laser Show, Denise, again with the more guitar-y sound and the kind of up tempo, you can kind of see where that song, the place that song came from.
Yeah, I can agree with that. They didn't go full homage like they did on that song in terms of the beginning and the chord choices with that one. But I was gonna say, in listening to this, I was trying to think of artists in the same era that were considered power pop, and the only thing that I could get close to was there's parts of Denise that remind me, especially in the vocal, that remind me a little bit of Superdrag.
I heard she used to be married. She listens to Pop Daddy. She works at Liberty Travel. She got a hot made of gravel. She controls me. She can't help herself. Won't you tell me? Do you love me, Denise? Whoa, do you love me, Denise? Oh, baby, tell me. Oh, baby, tell me.
When he does that, like like that reminded me of some of the edgier Superdrag stuff. Not that I don't think that guitar tone, which is kind of brittle and compressed, is not as Superdrag as what John Davis usually comes up with, but just sort of the attitude and the vocal part.
I heard Senator's Daughter as being something off of Head Trip in Every Key, like the other side of Superdrag, the less direct, more little slightly psychedelic, more 60s influenced Superdrag. So I could definitely hear that for sure. And I picked up on I think you mentioned like some Britpop stuff to some of this, like Go Hippie for sure. Sounds like it's in the ballpark of Oasis, but even something like Hat and Feet felt a little like kind of a cheeky Blur song, or maybe even like Stone Roses. Like there's you know what I mean? So
It
there's
definitely has
definitely
a Blur
some
feel, yeah.
contemporaries and even like Ebony Gardens sound a little bit like Death Cab for me, like in parts. Like I heard a lot of calls to either contemporaries or older bands outside of obviously like the obvious ones like the Beatles. Like I heard a little bit of Sloan and Laser Show, like that could be a Sloan song. It was sort of it felt like I was hearing I think throughout the record what pop, power pop sounded like in the late 90s. Like I was hearing a lot of other bands sort of in this space that were trying, to break out of the sort of the dark, grungy stuff and bring something more, melodic and a little bit fun and to the table.
And this definitely, the lyrics are on the edge of being almost too cute and smart. Like it doesn't quite go, I think, because of the fact that it's got the oomph, that it helps keep it like not goofy. I don't know how else to describe it. But stuff that would maybe be similar to this, like They Might Be Giants, like they don't get into this guitar sound, so it doesn't quite work for me as well.
Yeah, I think to get into what doesn't work, I think it's in that theme. So I agree with you. There's an edge and or like somber tone darkness to some of this stuff that then when these lyrics are juxtaposed with it work. Whereas if you don't have that, tinge of darkness or edge and you have the same lyrics and then the music is super bright and happy, then it's like they might be giants. Like it takes on a whole different tone.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the material where that edge or sort of darker tone is there, it's perfect. It's like the perfect mix. A great example is like A Fine Day for a Parade. It's got this almost John Lennon-esque kind of melody to it, and but it's a little dreamy, but then there's this like tone of melancholy over the whole thing, which I think works great. The first three songs on the record start off, with a brighter feel, but they've got that edge. It hits this portion though, like Hat and Feet, Valley of the Mall, Troubled Times, and Go Hippie, where I start to lose the script on like the tone. It gets a little like there's genre hopping a bit, and I lose a little bit of that edge and that somber tone. And then I'm just wondering, like, through that span of the record, who is this band? It almost feels like, hey, we're gonna try a song that sounds like, like we're just gonna jump around and try a bunch of different songs that sound like different bands. And then to me, it comes back with A Fine Day for a Parade, and then I start to get like, oh, well, this is like the band doing something a little bit more contemplative, and then you sort of progress through and you get back into more of the the power pop stuff, which feels familiar with the earlier portion of the record. The album starts to make more sense at the end too. So to me, it's like there's like solid bookends of like, oh, this is what this band's about and what the record's about, and there's this chunk in the middle where I'm scratching my head a little bit on like where are they going with these sounds, and like it's missing that mix of like bright pop, playful lyrics juxtaposed next to either edgy guitars or just melancholy. So that's what didn't work for me on the record. It's in that theme you were talking about. Anything not work for you, Tim?
There's a couple spots where the lyrics, it's not that they're bad, they just like draw attention to them, to the like how, like there's a part where he rhymes travel and gravel, which he pauses before gravel to pay, so you pay extra special attention to it. And I'm like, I don't necessarily need that pause there. Like you could have just rolled the whole sentence or the lyric in a row, but it's like he was
him winking at the listener.
Yes, exactly. Not that it's a huge deal, but it was just like, okay, you're clever. Now the Red Dragon Tattoo bridge, I want to bring that up because in the Pitchfork review, it says, to make sure the album ages badly, Fountains of Wayne throw in silly pop culture references such as the guy from Korn and Pink Floyd laser shows, which wouldn't be so bad if it was done with any sense of lyrical ingenuity. I mean, I'll take Pavement's "What About the Voice of Geddy Lee" over the guy from Korn any day. I'm going to slightly disagree that this is aged badly because people like Korn didn't just fizzle out after one record. They were still pretty relevant in the 2000s for a while. And pretty sure there are still Pink Floyd laser shows going on at at any sort of dome that does that every year. So I don't necessarily think that those two things are huge mistakes, but they do make it less timeless because
It's
you know what I mean?
but it's pop music. So to me, like the whole point is to be reflective of pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's an art to that where you want to do it in a way that like it stays as relevant as it can for as long as it can. And I think that usually lies in what's the context. Like, could I remove the specific word corn and still understand the sentiment he's trying to convey? Yes. Like I get what he's trying to say there. trying to say like a cliched rock star. Like, okay, I can get that without knowing exactly who Korn is. So to me, I think it's fine. It stood out to me. I mean, I didn't notice it. That would be my only critique of it is, just my ears picking up on those references. But when I listen to what the lyrics are saying, and I, I get the point, and I think anybody else who, even if they don't know who Korn is, would still get the point.
Right. Exactly. So I
I
don't think
defend
it's
that
that.
lyric. Sorry, I defend that lyric by thinking, what's a better way to talk about somebody that's got a lot of tattoos? I mean, that's what that song's about, right?
Yeah.
Sure. So I did want to, just from the Pitchfork review, there was a sentence here that I wanted to, or section that ends it. It says, if an album could ever be accused of being too nice, this would be it. Nothing offends, no sound feels out of place, no vocal is out of harmony. And you know what? It's boring. Move to the city or the woods. He's basically cracking on the suburbs, because earlier it says this album is suburbia perfectly captured by four suburbanites with suburban sounds. Perhaps their accomplishment is to be commended, but then again, it's suburbia, and how banal is that? Typical, it also leans a little bit. He keeps mentioning that they're white dudes, and I'm like, leans a little on that trope a little too much, because I don't know if he's just never listened to power pop before, but like power
Right.
pop sounds pristine. That's the whole point. Like, yeah, Teenage Fan Club might throw in some feedback, but that's a rarity. The sound of power pop is the perfection of the vocal and the perfection of the song. You're trying to attain pop status, but with a heavy guitar or a loud guitar.
Yeah, I also think it's absurd to say that, like, oh, because you're from the suburbs and you're like reflecting on that you have nothing interesting to say. That's
Exactly.
insane. I think it's actually even more difficult, and should be commended to try to, the way that they've crafted, clever stories about these things and people and places, is actually harder to do than if you were from some crazy exotic place that, wrote stories for you. Like, you got to look deep harder and like reflect on like, how is this place affecting me to get to the point where they are with these songs. And not that every song needs to be like this or not, but just to like, from the
No.
premise of the Pitchfork review of like, oh, well, that's my critique, is like, nothing interesting can come from this concept, is essentially what I'm hearing.
Well, and I think that he misses the point, which they were trying to make, was they grew up listening to albums about specific places,
Yeah.
and it like tuned them into that place. And rather than try to write a song about London, England, because they've never lived there.
Right.
I think Chris Collingwood grew up there or something. They wrote a song about where they lived in New York. So that makes sense. I
guess Pitchfork is saying they shouldn't write songs. I don't, what do you do with that critique?
I don't know.
It's like,
I don't know.
Well, you didn't come from the right place, so nobody wants to hear what you have to say.
The person who wrote it wrote about 12 reviews total for Pitchfork.
Sorry, you weren't born in New York City. Your music career is over.
He also gave so they gave this a 5.1. Deloused in the Comatorium by the Mars Volta gave a 4.9.
Oh no,
that's the only Mars Volta album I like.
That's a great album.
What was the? Yeah, there were a couple other reviews that I didn't particularly care for, but anyway, Mike, is there anything that doesn't work for you on this record?
It's really hard for me to find something, because I think this is pretty great record. Hat and Feet is my least favorite song. If you take all the songs from their first two albums combined, it's my least favorite. That said, I don't not like it. I just like it a whole lot less than all the other ones. That's all I got. There's nothing wrong with this record. Like, I don't think it's transcendent. but I don't think it's perfectly inoffensive. Pitchfork's pretty spot on about that. Like, it's great. They're good songs.
Well,
Well,
I think
that's
it would have been weird if they had dropped a bunch of F-bombs and, you know what I mean? Like, it just wouldn't have made sense. Like,
Well, it's more like, is this album doing what it was intended to do? Yes.
right.
Like, it's not trying to be something it's not. It's very aware of what it is and what it's trying to say. And it's, successful in doing that.
they're not
Right.
remotely pretentious, and like they come across on this record like regular dudes, which I'm cool with.
Yeah. And so I was trying to think back. I remember when Red Dragon Tattoo came out, because I liked that song. And I don't know that I probably did get a couple songs off of Napster around this time in like 99, 2000. Because I knew like Denise, but I don't remember ever getting the record back at that time. And some of the other stuff sounded familiar, but I don't know if it just sounded familiar because their melodies are so good that they sound like melodies that should have existed. Sometimes power pop melodies, you're like, wow, that sounds like it's 100 years old, but really it's just a new song. But they're so good at crafting these like really timeless, quote unquote, Beatle influenced melodies, where you mentioned like John Lennon or whatever, that they come across as being familiar even when they're not. Pitchfork out of the way. So this record actually didn't do well. I mean, it got a little bit of it got some positive reviews. Pitchfork famously gave it a 5.1. The Enemy gave it a 5 out of 10. Rolling Stone a 3 out of 5. All Music a 4 out of 5. Alternative Press 4 out of 5. Entertainment Weekly gave it an A. Melody Maker a 4 out of 5. So a bit mixed. And it got them dropped. So is it because of the time period? I mean, this is 1999. I know a lot of stuff was getting thrown at the wall in 99, but I feel like what I was listening to and what the radio was not anything close to Red Dragon Tattoo. Or the other single that they wanted was Troubled Times. That was like a single that they sent out and they didn't get any promotion. Which I listened to that, I'm like, where are you sending that?
It's
What
sad.
radio station is playing that in 99?
Yeah, it's too sad to be on the radio. That song, if memory serves, actually predates the rest of the songs on this album. That's one of the ones that they wrote in college that they brought back.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, 99, you got Creed and those bands, Kid Rock. Where is this fitting in rock radio?
Even so what is it, 4 years later that Stacy's Mom comes out?
Yeah, 2003.
Which was, my memory of it was that it was pretty huge.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Even by their own history, this is a little ahead of where things are or where things are going to go. I don't know that. I mean, to me, Stacy's Mom sounds very close to this record. Like, it doesn't sound like crazy different. So this sounds like just a little ahead of its time, maybe by like a year to 3, barely.
Yeah.
But it was that was like we were very deep in 99. My memory is that we were very deep in like 4th generation grunge,
like Godsmack and Days of the New and
yeah
that kind of stuff. And it was, Woodstock 99 was a disaster. The Red Hot Chili Peppers and
the fever hadn't broke yet.
Right.
It was going to be another year or two.
And in comparison, Stacy's Mom went to like top 10 or 20 in like 7 or 8 different countries. It charted in like 4 different charts in the US, 4 or 5. The album went number 1 on the Heat Seekers chart, and I think the single alone did some pretty decent numbers too. Like gold in the US, just the single, back when you could still buy a CD single.
Yeah, I always thought that was funny because in my personal ranking of this band's album, this one comes in at number 2 ahead of the one that everybody knows.
Interesting. Well, I don't know that whole album. I know a couple, obviously know the single, but I was looking through the rest of the songs, like Bright Future and Sales, I think I've heard. And I don't remember. I can't remember. So again must have you just heard the singles or downloaded it illegally.
But I mean, it's the same band. The songwriting is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I think the production's a lot bigger on that other album with that big hit. But this was a band I already liked, and so I got this like right when it came out. I'm holding the compact disc up. I was never an Napster person. I'm an old guy that I always like to buy CDs and have the lyrics and the pictures. Yeah, so one of the things I learned about is that I just apparently didn't have my finger on the popular music zeitgeist, right? Because
No, sir, you did not.
I did not have the Godsmack record. I will admit, I did not have that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
we didn't either.
yeah, exactly.
But
get away from me. That's all I remember from that band.
If you turned on the radio, it was hard to get away from it.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into our overall ratings for this record. We'll share the poll results in a moment. But Jay, where do you land? Worthy album, better EP, or decent single?
I'm gonna worthy album. I'm gonna give the obligatory. It's too long. I think you could chunk out a couple of the songs in the middle between Hat and Feet and Go Hippie. Take 2 or 3 from there. I think this album gets a lot tighter. I think it's also a sin for a pop record to be too long. Like, always err on the side of a little too short than too long if you're writing a pop record. That's my opinion. But that's really my only complaint. And I don't mean to say any of those songs are bad. They're well crafted. Parts of them are really interesting. I just think in the course of the record, it's where I fade a bit and get a little confused. So I could see those being trimmed out, and this makes a lot more sense and is more cohesive for me. So, worthy album. Where'd you land?
I agree with you on a worthy album. I also agree that it's a little long, which was utterly predictable. I agree with Mike that Hat and Feet is the weakest track. And I almost wonder, I don't understand why Prom Theme is not the closer. Like, to me, that is the obvious closer for the record. If I was rearranging this, I would almost make it 2 halves. Like, the first half would be all the louder guitar track stuff, guitar oriented stuff, and then the second half would be like the acoustic, the slowed down, the more contemplative stuff. So it gives you less of a jolt. So when you go from Denise to Hat and Feet, it doesn't feel like such a massive shift.
Yeah.
So that would be the only song I would remove is Hat and Feet, but then I would just do some rearranging. Mike, what about you? This is obvious, but we're going to ask you anyways.
Yeah, I'm going to say worthy album. I've owned this CD for 24 years now, which is a long time. I really like driving to this one, even when I was a lot younger, like in late 90s, early 2000s. I used to like to put this in the car and drive, especially if I was going to go to see some friends in Columbus, for example. I couldn't get all the way. I mean, it would be done before I got to Columbus, but it was, about an hour drive. It's a good thing to listen to in the car. Wouldn't have to change CDs too often. Even though, like I said, Hat and Feet's my least favorite song of the first 2 records, I still think it's a good song. I like all 14 of these songs, and I actually never thought about the order before. I do like Senator's Daughter as an album closer. Prom Theme is probably a better album closer, but I think Senator's Daughter works. It's just that I've listened to this album so many times that the order is like baked into my soul. Like, you know
Sure.
how when you listen to the same record so many times, you just are ready for what's coming next because you know already. So I have a hard time picturing it in a different order just because of my familiarity with it. But yeah, my Worthy album, my second favorite Fountains of Wayne album out of their catalog.
Well, our patrons agreed. Worthy album 77%, better EP 8%, decent single 15%. So Ian was joined by at least one other person in their casual hatred of this record. No, not hatred, just dislike. That's fine. That's okay. Hey, we've done 2 quirky pop records to start this year. We started with Ben Folds 5. Now we're on to the Fountains of Wayne. Is this foretelling how this year is going to go? Is it?
I wouldn't get ahead of yourself. I think we kind of go in cycles. We'll get a span of like 3 or 4 really hard records, and then 3 or 4, poppy. We'll see.
Well, a
long year.
I'll give you folks who are listening a little preview because this episode comes out just before we record the next episode. Next one is on the Verve. It was just posted today on our Patreon. If you were part of our Patreon, you might have caught that. That we are doing the Verve on Northern Soul next. It's our next record. So if that interests you and you want to vote Worthy album, better EP, or decent single, you should join us over at Patreon to do that. Couple other things, some house cleaning, as they say in the business. I don't know what business that is. House cleaning business, I guess. If you'd like to suggest an album for one of our monthly album tournaments, you can go to digmeoutpodcast.com to suggest. You can also make suggestions for our new 80s metal podcast via that same form. It's just different information that you plug in.
You just pick an 80s date and then
right,
try your best to
again metal,
fit the genre of what you think metal is.
Metal.
We're gonna have to make some judgment calls here, but
right,
but yes,
leave your Taylor Dane at home. I was gonna say Swift for a moment.
Wrong Taylor.
But we'll be launching that soon. It's also where you can go to sign up for the box newsletter. It comes out every weekend. Release of calendar of new releases of 80s, 90s, and aughts music, movies, books, TV shows, that kind of stuff. And finally, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback. Mike, thank you for coming back on the show. Thank you for being part of the community and being part of our Discord. Chopping it up. I said chopping it up to somebody and they were like, what does that mean? I was like, that's, you're talking, you're like having a conversation back and forth, you're chopping it up. And they're like, what? No, I've never heard that before.
This was a young person, wasn't it?
It was a young person.
That's
they didn't like my tomfoolery, I guess. So, but
they call you a boomer.
I had somebody call me that and I was like, are you calling me a boomer?
Solidly a Generation X. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that infuriates me. They're like, what is that? There's only 2 things that exist in this world: boomers and millennials. Everybody else, it doesn't count.
Yep, pretty much.
I was like, we were raging against boomers before you guys were even born, and now we don't even.
We knew they sucked.
We were trying to tell you the whole time.
We knew it. Okay, Mike, thank you. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. We'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.
What if I